It's time to talk some fantasy football. Michelle, you ready for this?
All right, let's do it.
All right,
Sounds
so
good.
we got to bring in an expert because obviously, I mean, we play fantasy, but we're not an expert.
We're not experts.
Like our guest that we're going to bring in on the video call center, Jamey Eisenberg, CBS Sports fantasy football analyst. Jamey, we appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, we are getting closer and closer to NFL training camps opening up. I'm sure people are getting ready to try and circle a date for when they'll have their fantasy football drafts. But let's talk about the growth of fantasy football from when it started to where it is now. I mean, it's so massive at this point where you just thought, okay, in this beginning infant stages, like, would this last? But now it's like, yeah, this is here to stay for a long, long time.
Well, I hope so. Otherwise, I'll be out of a job. But you're starting to get NFL coaches. Sean Payton at the most recent owners meetings this past spring, talking about the impact of fantasy football on the game. I have a colleague or a friend of mine in the industry, in the sports writing industry. He was asked, with the 100-year anniversary of the NFL, one of the biggest influences of the game, or one of the biggest changes of the game. He brought up fantasy football being one of those, and certainly you look at the impact that's had on viewership, on people who go to the games. They tend to stay home and watch on the red zone because they want to catch up their scores. Take a look at their games in terms of their fantasy points. So it's certainly changed the way people are viewing the game, watching the game, understanding the game. You're not just looking at it from a Jets or Giants perspective, for example. You're watching the Seahawks, the Bengals, the Browns, any team that you can get your hands on that you have players on their fantasy roster.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier. I mean, I have girlfriends that I didn't even know they knew like what football was, and now they're all excited every year for their fantasy drafts, whether it be for wine bottles or whatever at the end. But my question is, so when do you start preparing? When does the draft prep officially begin?
I think for the novice fan, it's typically when we get to around the second or third preseason game, when you start to realize that the season's coming. But, the expert fantasy player is starting right now. We're getting tweets, we're getting questions, we're doing mock drafts. We just finished the second edition of our magazine here at CBS Sports. So it's something that, I think July 4th probably is when people start to get it on their radar because it's past the midpoint of the summer. You understand now that the draft has happened for the NFL. Free agency is over, and you're starting to hear, okay, training camps are coming at the end of July. So typically around the start of the season for the NFL, training camp, preseason games is when you start to see people really getting into it. The time to go do your fantasy draft, if you really want to have all the information at your disposal, is after the third preseason game, because that's when we know hopefully all the rosters, what they're going to look like, injuries, etc. But the people that are really into it are starting to prepare right now.
All right, Jamey, as you mentioned, training camp starting at the end of July. So if you're in fantasy and you consider yourself an expert or you want to win that championship, that title again within your league, you have to be paying attention to what the coaches are saying and how certain players are developing in training camp, right? How much stock do you put into making sure that people are watching or understanding what's going on in training camp and how that will translate for the season?
Oh, it's follow the news, certainly the great NFL newsbreakers around the world, around the country, with all the major outlets, our own Jason Lockenfor here at CBS Sports, keeping you up to date on all the latest news in the league. But injuries, we have two major contract situations that we're dealing with right now, with Ezekiel Elliott saying he's going to be a holdout, Melvin Gordon saying pay me or trade me. We know the transactions that have happened this offseason with, guys obviously that are tied to the New York market, Odell Beckham leaving, Le'Veon Bell joining the Jets. You have to keep an eye on those things. You certainly have to keep an eye on what the coaches are saying in regards to depth charts, injuries, roster movements, all those things. It's all goes hand in hand. People who are not necessarily fantasy managers, fantasy players that still follow the NFL, you can also get your NFL news from a fantasy perspective as well. It kind of ties in together.
You mentioned some storylines just now, Odell Beckham and others as well, but just what are the biggest storylines that you see going into this season?
Yeah, the two big ones that we're following right now, Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott, their contract situations are huge. Hopefully they're going to be ready to go come the start of camp. I think you'll get that for sure from Ezekiel Elliott, just given what his contract situation is. He would lose free agency, for example, if he does, or a year of free agency, if he doesn't show up by August 6th. Melvin Gordon's a little bit different situation, but if those guys have any sort of holdout, you're talking about two guys that could be top 5 overall picks in any sort of fantasy league. Todd Gurley was the number 1 player the last 2 seasons. He's got that knee injury that he's dealing with. Last year had 2 games that he missed, kind of limped through the playoffs. We saw he wasn't the same guy in the postseason. That was really impactful for the Rams. I don't think that they would have necessarily wanted to use C.J. Anderson as much as they did. They probably would have liked to get a lot more Todd Gurley, a lot more production out of Todd Gurley. So we'll see what his knee situation is. And then you have some of the player movement. Again, the Jets the Jets getting Le'Veon Bell, the Steelers losing Bell, losing Antonio Brown. Can guys like James Conner and Juju Smith-Schuster replace them? What the Browns have built, getting Odell Beckham, and what they acquired last year with Baker Mayfield, also the addition of Kareem Hunt. And then there's a pretty prominent guy in New England that's going to be missing this year with Rob Gronkowski gone. We'll see how the Patriots try and replace him. You can't replace Gronk. Fantasy managers can't replace Gronk. So we'll see how that all unfolds.
All right, Jamey, when it comes to drafting a Jets or Giants player, we know the obvious names of, Le'Veon Bell for the Jets or Saquon Barkley for the Giants. Those are the hot names that you want to grab. But what are some other names or positions that are the best positions to try and go after maybe Le'Veon and Saquon off the board?
Yeah, we'll start with the Giants. The receiving core is obviously going to be different. No more Beckham. So Saquon Barkley is going to be the catalyst of the offense. But I think you're going to get great production out of Evan Ingram. He's one of my favorite tight ends to draft. There's really a big three at tight end now that Gronk is gone. You have Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Zach Ertz, whatever order you want to put those guys in. But I think you look at Ingram, he's the next guy off the board. And he's been very productive every time Beckham has been off the field. Last year, Beckham missed the final 4 games. 15 or more PPR points. That's usually what we talk about. Each point last year when Beckham was gone. And you go back to previous year, 2017, when Ingram was a rookie, 6 of 12 games, he hit that 15 PPR number. So he was awesome, and I think he has a chance to be great without Beckham on the field. For the Jets, it's Robbie Anderson. You look at this receiving core, they add Jamison Crowder, have Quincy Enunwa. We hope to see a lot more from Sam Darnold. But Anderson's a guy that clicked with Darnold at the end of the season. In 3 of his final 4 games, hit 17 or more PPR points. So there's a lot to like about Robbie Anderson this year for the Jets.
Outside of the Jets and the Giants, who are the sleepers that people should be watching?
One of my favorite quarterbacks this year, you can get him late, but I think the upside is tremendous, is the rookie, Kyler Murray. Goes to the Cardinals with the number 1 overall pick. We don't typically talk about rookie quarterbacks being great fantasy options, but I think this is a different scenario. You have Cliff Kingsbury in his offense, was very successful in college. They're going to run a lot of plays, and Murray, 4,000 passing yards, 1,000 rushing yards in college. I think that's going to translate to the NFL with some of the weapons that the Cardinals have added. I like Ito Smith as a running back for the Falcons, another guy you can get late. Devontae Freeman should be very good, but he's had a hard time staying healthy. Only played 2 games last year. Ito Smith now replaces Tevin Coleman. You like this Falcons offense, or at least you should. They really enhanced the offensive line, so Ito Smith is a guy that you can target with a late-round pick. Curtis Samuel is one of my favorite wide receivers to draft this year. You look at the outlook for him. It's DJ Moore as the number 1 guy. He's a second-year player. Samuel is a third-year player for the Panthers. And we saw Cam Newton, as long as his shoulder is healthy, he got great production from Samuel at the end of last season. 6 of his final 7 games hit 11 or more PPR points. So I think the outlook for Curtis Samuel should be really good going into 2019. Another young wide receiver, Anthony Miller for the Bears, scored 7 touchdowns last year, led the team in receiving touchdowns, and he did that playing through a shoulder injury. I think now that he's healthy, a full year in the NFL, he should play really well opposite Allen Robinson, another guy you can get late. I think the upside for Anthony Miller should be tremendous. I like him. I also like Damian Harris as a young running back for the Patriots. Sony Michel dealing with a knee injury. We could see Harris step up in his rookie year. We know the Patriots don't typically like to lean on rookies. They did so last year with Michel by necessity. If Michel's slowed at any point during the season, Damian Harris, the rookie from Alabama, could be really good.
So, Michelle, there should be no reason why we should.
Yeah, I'm good. I don't even want to air this. Can we just take this and have this be our thing?
Jamey, if we come up short, then blame us. I'm sorry. You've given us so much knowledge
yes,
and
thank you so much.
to help us. Jamey Eisenberg, CBS Fantasy's football analyst. We appreciate the time.
For more great videos from the MSG 150, check out right there. And remember, our show is on Monday through Thursday, 8 to 10:30 p.m. on MSG Network and MSG Go.